The sun was sinking low over Maple Avenue, staining the quiet suburban street with gold. From afar, everything looked calm, the trimmed lawns, the picket fences, the hush of a small American neighborhood. But behind one cracked sidewalk and a chipped white porch, the silence broke with the sound of a sob so small and trembling it could have belonged to the wind. A little boy stood there, clutching a worn-out teddy bear, his eyes red and swollen, his voice breaking through the stillness. "He hit my grandma," he whispered, and those words carried enough pain to shatter the calm of the world. If you believe that no child should ever cry out of fear, that kindness and courage can still change lives, please take a moment to like this video, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, where we remind the world that compassion is the strongest kind of power. The boy's name was Ethan, just 6 years old. His hoodie was streaked with dust from where he had fallen running down the steps. Behind him, sitting weakly on the porch, was his grandmother Clara, her soft blue dress torn at the shoulder, a bruise darkening one side of her face. She held her arm and tried to hide her pain from him, but she couldn't hide what had already happened. At the doorway stood a man, tall, red-faced, and half-drunk, holding a beer bottle, glaring at the boy as though he'd spoken a forbidden truth. His name was Ray. He wasn't family, just someone who'd promised to help out after Clara's husband passed away. Instead, he brought anger, control, and pain. Ethan ran out of the house that afternoon barefoot, his small hands clutching the teddy bear his grandmother had sewn for him when times were better. He didn't know where to go. He only knew someone had to help. His tears fell onto the concrete as he stumbled down the front path, and that's when the rumble came. The deep, thunderous growl of engines filled the air, breaking through the stillness like a storm rolling in. 6 motorcycles turned the corner, glinting in the sun, roaring closer until they stopped right in front of Clara's house. The man leading them was hard to miss, a tall, broad biker with a salt and pepper beard and tattoos curling down his arms like old battle scars. The words "Hell's Angels" were stitched across the back of his leather vest, and under that, a smaller patch that read RL.CHLLS. His name was Reed, the kind of man whose very presence silenced noise and stirred something raw in the air. When he saw the boy crying by the steps, he killed the engine, swung his leg off the bike, and crouched down. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, his gravelly voice carrying both warmth and weight. "What happened?" Ethan didn't answer with words at first. He just pointed toward the porch, toward the trembling old woman sitting on the step and the man standing above her, bottle still in hand. Reed's jaw tightened. Inside him, something familiar and painful sparked. He had seen this kind of cruelty before, in his own past, in his own home, when he was too small to do anything but cry. But now, he wasn't small. And no one, not while he was around, was going to make a child cry like that again. Reed slowly stood, his eyes never leaving the drunk man on the porch. The rest of his crew, 5 men in black vests, stood behind him in silence, a wall of quiet judgment and power. The neighborhood was watching now. Curtains fluttered, doors cracked open. Everyone could feel what was coming. Ray tried to straighten, his bravado flickering between arrogance and fear. "This ain't your business," he muttered, his voice uncertain. But Reed just walked forward, calm, steady, unstoppable. The sunlight hit the chrome on his vest as he stopped at the bottom step, looking up. "It became my business," he said quietly, the moment I heard a child say those words. Ray's hand trembled, the beer bottle lowering slowly. He glanced at Clara, the woman whose kindness he'd crushed, and then at the child who had run to strangers for help. His lips quivered with some twisted excuse that never made it past his throat. Because in that moment, the truth stood before him, not in words but in presence, a line of men who had once been broken but had rebuilt themselves into shields for others. Ethan stood behind Reed, still clutching his teddy bear, watching the men who had hurt his grandma shrink for the first time. Reed didn't need to raise his voice or his hands. The weight of what he represented, justice, protection, brotherhood, was enough. He leaned closer to Ray, voice calm but cutting. "She doesn't need your help anymore. Pack your things. You're done here." Ray backed up a step, then another. No one stopped him when he stumbled inside to grab his truck keys and drove off down the street. The sound of the engine faded, and for the first time that day, there was peace. Reed turned back toward Clara. He knelt again, this time beside her. She tried to smile through her pain. "You didn't have to," she whispered. "Ma'am," he interrupted gently, No one should ever have to live scared. Not you. Not him. His voice broke just slightly as he looked at Ethan. Then he motioned to his men, who stepped forward quietly, one of them offering a water bottle, another taking out a first aid kit. Neighbors watched as a group of men society often called dangerous showed more tenderness than the world expected. They checked on Clara, called for help, made sure she was safe. When the ambulance arrived, Reed stayed behind with Ethan, sitting on the steps, talking softly while the sun lowered into the horizon. The boy finally smiled, just a small, fragile smile, but it was enough to make Reed's throat tighten. As the paramedics helped Clara into the vehicle, Ethan ran to Reed and hugged him tightly around the arm. "Thank you," he whispered, clutching his teddy bear. Reed looked down at him and simply nodded. When the ambulance pulled away, the bikers mounted their motorcycles again. But before Reed started his engine, he glanced once more at the house, at the little boy waving from the porch, at the old woman safe inside. He didn't say it aloud, but the thought echoed through him. Sometimes, the loudest acts of kindness are done by those the world least expects. He revved his bike once, the roar echoing down Maple Avenue, not as a threat but as a promise, that kindness still rides where it's needed. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that strength and compassion can come from the unlikeliest people, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner, where real courage begins with simple kindness. Before you go, comment below, what would you have done if you heard a child cry those words? Because sometimes, one person's courage can change everything.